Okay, you threw out the Tupac name. How did you meet him? And let's hear some good stories, because anytime anybody can talk about Tupac is always gold.
Yeah, it is. He was amazing, right? So I didn't like him at first. I lived in New York. I lived in the city at this point in time, and I was going to the clubs, and at the clubs there were always two lines. There was the VIP line and then the regular line, which we called the dick line. And Pac was always rolling really deep, and he was always loud and the center of attention everywhere he went. And of course, he was always in the VIP line because he was coming up at that point. He wasn't famous yet, but he was coming up, and the underground, we all knew who he was. And I would get out of the VIP line and go get in the back of the dick line because I just didn't want to be around that energy. Like whenever he was around, it was just negative to me. So I always avoided him like the plague. And then when he got into a situation in New York where he felt like the powers that be in the New York rap community, he felt like they had started a cabal. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Cabal, C-A-B-A-L. They had started a cabal and they were out to get him. And he was very paranoid. And I saw that he felt like he was in New York alone. And I felt bad for him, even though I didn't really appreciate who he was as a person or even really a rapper. I mean, I kind of liked his rap, but whatever, right? And I decided to try to help him. So I reached out to a couple of my friends in the Fruit of Islam, a guy named Brother Arthur, and I asked him if he could protect Pac, be the security around Pac until he was sentenced. And he was going to be sentenced in like a couple of days.
And sentenced for what at this time? And also what year are we talking roughly?
Sexual harassment. It was actually rape, but he was sentenced to sexual misconduct, I think was the actual term.
That was the situation where basically, like, I believe he had hooked up with a girl and then a couple of his friends might have taken advantage of her, and it wasn't necessarily him, but he was basically roped into it.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And it was actually Haitian Jack who was the part of the crew around him, who was a relatively powerful street dude at the time in New York. And he was very nervous. He was, after the quad situation, he was very nervous. And I kind of felt for him. It's like, if I were a New Yorker in LA and I felt like, people were ganging up on me in LA, I would want somebody to step in and try to help me. So that's what I decided to do. And I asked the guys, his security team, I asked them not to mention it to him because why, right? Well, of course they did. So when he got to Rikers, he was sentenced. When he got to Rikers, he wrote me a letter and he said, "Thank you so much." And he said to me, it's really nice to know that somebody would appreciate me for my music so much that they would look out. And like, that wasn't it at all. Like, I wasn't a fan trying to look out. Like, I felt like he needed help. And so I wrote back to him. I'm like, dude, it's not about your music. Like, it's not that you're whack or anything, but I didn't step in to help you because of your music. I stepped in to help you because you were out here alone. And I run an organization called Rap Coalition. And I felt an obligation to help you, like to step in and help protect you because you were out here alone. I would have wanted somebody to do that for me. And he wrote me back. And when the letter came, I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't know that I want to read this because I imagined it was going to be, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, my music's great. What are you talking about? I'm not loud. I really thought he was going to go off on me. And he did not. It was such an amazingly thoughtful and intelligent letter. And I hadn't seen that side of him. And I'm like, oh, shit. And because he came so different than I expected, he really caught my attention and he blew my mind. So I sent him some books. I sent him Machiavelli. I sent him just a bunch of different books.
So you probably inadvertently named the album, huh?
Yeah, maybe.
Somebody might have introduced him to it otherwise, but pretty likely, right? I mean,
he would have found it because Like that was back then, that was the mindset. Like back then, everybody in our community was reading Behold the Pale White Horse. We were all reading The Prince by Machiavelli. So it's not like I had some profound, unique intelligence and I was sharing it. I was sharing him books that our world was into, right?
But it's interesting because, like, if you give a guy a book in their day-to-day life, pretty high chance they're not reading it. You give a guy a book in prison, pretty high chance that they're going to read it.
He digested it. And it's funny because whenever rappers are incarcerated, I always send books. I still do today. You know, I have an email list of because there's email in the feds, right? I have an email list of like 40 guys that actively corresponding with from the rap world, like either street dudes or rappers or used to be rappers or whatever, like C Murder, people like that. But so Pac and I became pen pals. Like we wrote back and forth, and he gave me some great advice about Rap Coalition, some of which I followed, some of which I didn't. And I gave him, what I thought was great advice about his career. I didn't like that he signed to Death Row, but I understood why he did. He felt like they were the most powerful thing that wasn't New York, and he'd be protected. Mm. And he was, up to a point. So I understood him. I liked him. At the time that he was killed, he was getting away from Death Row. I was putting together a business plan for Euthanasia, which was the name of his label. And we were talking to other major labels at that time.
So he was gonna change. That was his plan, was to leave Death Row and start a label called Euthanasia.
Yes.
And what was the metaphor there, and in comparison to euthanasia, which is basically killing children?
Right, right. And it's funny because the plan consisted of community centers and centers for women to bring their children to their job and put them in this place that would help take care of their kids and get them to the next level as, preschool, toddlers, children, whatever you want to call them. His plan consisted of all that. Like he was really community minded, and it was such a perfect fit because I was so community minded.
Right.
And I really loved the fact that this is the direction that he was going. And it's such a blight on humanity that we never really got to see what was next for him, because what was coming was amazing. He felt like he had divided the East Coast and the West Coast. So he was bringing them back together. And he was already working on an album called One Nation. He had already gotten tracks done, completed by East Coast rappers so that he could bring everybody back together and unify them. And that was going to be the first release on the new label. Wow. It was really kind of exciting where he was going. He was all about the people. He was all about giving back. He was all about kindness. And the one thing that you asked for like funny stories. I went to visit him when he was at Dannemora, and because he was famous, they sat us right by the guards in this room, right? There was one table that sort of sat above everybody. And they put us in the first seat. And, I asked him, at this point, he was fighting his case, and he felt like he was going to get out, and they were going to release him immediately because he was going to win the appeal. And I asked him, well, what about, the time that you've already served? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you're going to sue because you were put in prison at the height of your fucking album. You didn't get to promote it the way you needed to. Like, will there be are you going to sue? Like, will there be a case? And he's like, no, I think I'm going to ask the judge for a credit. And I thought that was the funniest shit ever. I'm like, yeah, you're going to go in front of the judge and say, okay, I just did 9 months that I shouldn't have done. So can I have a credit for that? Because for sure down the road at some point, some fucked up shit is going to happen and I'm going to get sentenced. So can I take the 9 months off that? And I just thought that was so funny. And even the guards, like in this high tower, chuckled over that. Like he had a great sense of humor.
Wow, that's quite a concept, though. I mean, if you could just be walking around knowing that you got a free 9 months in your pocket, and that you could just
how about it, right?
Get picked up for shoplifting and just no, I'm good.
Here's my month. Yeah. I thought that was funny as fuck.
Wow. So Yeah, no, it's crazy because like I remember I said when X passed, I said like something along the lines of like he was the Tupac of our generation, and then like TMZ immediately hits me up. They like want me to say that on camera for TMZ. No. But I feel like whenever I hear stories about Tupac, like that comparison just seems more and more apt. Like in terms of Pac and X both being young people that were extremely rambunctious, poorly behaved, crazy, violent, etc. And then like very quickly, like the weight of the world and the pressure of realizing how big their influence was led them to realize very quickly in X's case that like a lot of the stuff he'd been associating himself with was really not good, and he wanted to have a positive impact in the world, and then they were both sort of taken away right before they were able to start doing that.
And they were both super intelligent, and I didn't know X, so I shouldn't really speak.
No, he was brilliant.
In Pac's case, he was just like before his time. Like he was so fucking intelligent.
Right. Unbelievable. Yeah, and it's crazy to see how he's really revered as a real poet now too. Like I love seeing the way I've read a few different like short poetry books or like articles that try to, you know, sort of contextualize what he was doing and everything. And it's very good, like in my lifetime to see his words taken so seriously, because like I remember one thing, and I think a lot of people kind of have this story, is that I saw my mom bust out in tears when she heard Dear Mama.
Really?
Yeah, and that, you know, previously in my life, my mom had told me that rap was stupid, and I think she had, you know, I think at one point my dad had heard me listening to a particularly offensive Tupac song, and he had actually destroyed all my Tupac CDs because he was convinced that his, you know, 11-year-old kid was learning about all this terrible stuff from Tupac.
Right. It was and the then destruction of you.
Right, and then to see my mom have that reaction to that song, and for us to have that shared moment of like, holy shit, like, you do appreciate the stuff that I'm into. Like that was very, very big for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Tupac passes, and what was the change in the culture that you saw from that, from the ramifications of that?
I think, well, the biggest change was that it ended the whole East Coast, West Coast rivalry, at least as far as the media. And it was very media driven, but as far as the media drove it, and then also on the streets, like we really started to embrace each other a little bit more. It made it real, if that makes any sense. It made it like, oh, fuck, this could happen. Like people could die behind this shit. And not just random people could die, but like
superstars. Like
superstars could die, and people won't know who did it, or you know, it'll be an unsolved mystery forever, you know?
Do you
and
take
I think that people just became a little bit more, the labels, it changed on the business side. The labels immediately said, we no longer want any street labels. So any label that was attached to any street connotation, whereas in the past it had been a badge of honor, was no longer a badge of honor.
Right.
So if I was setting up a meeting for somebody at a major label, I would always have to tell them, okay, whatever you do, don't wear red or blue into this meeting, because it's gonna adversely affect you. So let's all wear black, or let's wear white or gray or whatever. But it became where the labels, who knew nothing about street shit whatsoever, tried to learn as much as they could so that they could be against it.
Do you think the media really was at fault for drumming up a lot of that East versus West hysteria?
Absolutely. They jumped on it at a time when rap was just really starting to go mainstream. So it became extremely topical. And then it fueled like half of the population that was anti-rap to begin with, you know? And then of course it fueled all the racists, like, see, you know, it really, like, the timing was horrendous for it.
Another classic interview in the books. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and head on over to nojumper.com to support. Appreciate y'all.